Hey everyone. So before we get started today, I wanted to mention that I actually have my own Gmail address. If you guys want to send me your own RPG horror stories, you can send it to oneboardlich@gmail.com, and I'll read your stories out loud right here. Now, before we begin, I just wanted to thank everyone who's been watching the video so far and appreciating things. Again, if you guys have any suggestions or anything, please just let me know, like either in a comment or email me with this email address. Or just like and subscribe if you think I'm doing a good job. I really appreciate it for everyone that watches every video. So, today's RPG horror stories, we're going to look at an ableist player who doesn't get along with a mute player at the table. Then we'll be looking at a fly on the wall in OP's game that butts in a little too much. And finally, we're going to look over at a group of Elder Scrolls players that know more about the lore than the DM does. Now please, sit down and listen to my tales. Our first story today is going to be titled, Guest Player Gets Angry Because a Mute Player Plays a Mute Character, by Reddit user Background Run 1316. Hello, Recording Glitch here. For some reason, looking back at the story, I can't actually find the post anymore. It seems like something happened with the poster, so I couldn't really make any slideshows of this, so hopefully my voice is just okay, and hopefully this is actually a true story, but please proceed with this with a grain of salt. Thank you. I run a game of the German RPG Das Schwarze Auge, and one of the players is mute. She has a text-to-speech app on her phone, and a mutual friend knows sign language, so communication works just fine. You pick a bunch of advantages and disadvantages for your character during creation, and one of them is actually being mute, which the player found delightful. She plays a mage who sold her voice to a demon in exchange for her magical abilities. She got herself a pocketbook with a medieval-style cover, which uses it to write down in-game communication. The concept is that her character has that same book, so it's actually super immersive. Last week, an acquaintance joined us for a session to see if he likes the game, and somehow ended up being completely irritated about the player's decision to play a character who's mute like herself. I'm not good at recounting conversations verbatim, but his main point was that she's romanticizing her own disability, which he called an extremely unhealthy way to cope, and also argued that she's being disrespectful to everyone else with the same disability. The argument completely stopped the game in its tracks, and he got so angry that he was shouting at some point, so I ended up telling him to either stop and continue playing or leave, and he actually left. Some people are just incomprehensible. Edit. Several comments mentioned that I should have told my acquaintance to leave immediately. I asked my mute friend about it, and her opinion is that she does not want someone else to instantly shut down arguments she finds herself in. She can argue for herself and wants to do that. Alright, we're starting off swinging here today. So, despite my ghoulish and skeletal figure, I actually am not a evil world dominating lich in real life. In fact, I actually work with a lot of disabled people, students especially that have different disabilities, either learning or otherwise. And I actually know a fair good amount of mute people. So it's one thing, it's definitely weird at first to get used to it if you're not used to people being mute and conversing through text and writing down things on a note, but it's not something that I've ever seen anyone actually react angrily for. In fact, it's just messed up all around. Like, why would you be mad? Generally, it's messed up to just mess with somebody and dislike someone for having a disability in the first place. And also saying that someone who has a disability is using a D&D game to cope with it, when it's really just something that's more of a psychological detail that they can't really fix on their own. That's just messed up all around. So I gotta poo-poo that play right here. On the other hand, I will say it was good on you, DM, for actually thinking about it and asking the player if she wanted to actually get that player kicked. And I mean, I won't say it's a good or bad thing that she wanted to like fight her own battles. It's another thing that she didn't want to immediately kick him out and she wanted to argue for herself. That is good in a confidence factor, but on the other hand, it's also the DM's job to kind of keep the game as consistent and as peaceful as possible. But overall, honestly, I think everyone was out in their P's and was minding. I think everyone was minding their P's and Q's. So I can't really fault anyone here. And the problem player left. So, as they say, the trash took himself out. So honestly, it could have been much worse, but it is really weird. Maybe that player just had a really bad day. But at least this player was able to get the hint, unlike the player in our next story. Story 2 is titled, You Aren't Playing With Us, by Reddit user Evil Tiny Wolf. A few months ago, I joined a beginner-friendly Pathfinder 2 game on a fairly large Discord server. The server wasn't dedicated to tabletop games, it just had a space set aside for us. GM Amy is patient and happy to explain the rules, and the group meshed very well together. Sadly, one of the players had to drop due to schedule change at work. We were about halfway through the module, so we took a brief hiatus until Amy found us a new player. She did a session 0 with the guy, but no one else in the game had met him yet. Game day rolled around, and Amy warned us the new guy was running a little late. She said she'd work on some extra prep work while we waited, but we were welcome to talk freely. The three of us were chatting, and one player was showing off some artwork he'd done of his character during the hiatus when the stranger joined the call. At first, we thought he was the new guy, but it quickly became obvious that this guy was lost. He asked if we were the new D&D game. Nope, Pathfinder. Amy noticed the new person and happily answered his questions while we were waiting. The stranger asked if he could play. Amy said no. She was running a beginner-friendly module designed to teach players the game, and it was designed for 4 players. She couldn't adjust difficulty with no notice. He asked if he could watch our game instead. There were some awkward and reluctant comments, but no one said no. So, Amy said he could watch for her as long as the group approved. When new guy Greg showed up, we all introduced our characters to him. The stranger made comments and suggested changes, even though he kept talking like we were playing D&D. Everyone rejected and ignored his suggestions. Amy began narrating the previous player giving the party his daily buff before he left, and our new party member happening to see us on the street and offering to help. The stranger interrupted and talked over Amy a few times during her narration. New guy Greg asked who the stranger was. Before anyone else could answer, the stranger said he was hopefully going to be joining our group. Amy corrected this and repeated her previous comments about the module being designed for 4 players. A player was having technical issues, so I began streaming my screen and controlling their character for them to help Amy out. The stranger asked if he could roll dice for the player so he can feel included, and asked to play an NPC. Amy rejected both ideas and asked him to mute his mic. He said he'd be quiet. He lied. About an hour in, Amy summoned a mod to the channel. Since the server wasn't dedicated to tabletop games, a game master didn't have any moderation control, and she couldn't remove the stranger. She can only ask him to stop. Even with the mod watching, the stranger couldn't keep quiet. He kept making comments and mumbling various issues, sometimes hitting the push to speak button repeatedly so he could sigh dramatically. The mod kicked the stranger from the call for us, but stayed for the rest of the game just in case we needed it. Unlike the stranger, the mod was a great observer, never made a peep. Just watched the game and waited until the session ended to congratulate us for talking one combat down peacefully and ending the other with some epic rolls. I think this is the weirdest story we've dealt with so far on this channel, not because of any crime that anyone committed in the actual session, but because this player was just not getting the hint and being told directly that they're not playing the game. Now, of course, in any other situation, they'd probably be fine to play at a later date, maybe with a different group if Amy's gonna run a different game for someone. But this guy right here just shot those chances in the foot because he just wouldn't shut up and did everything in his power to be as annoying as possible for someone that's just watching the game. Now, I can forgive the player just assuming everything is D&D and trying to correct people on that. But what I can abide by is the guy being annoying and talking over everyone and trying to force his way into the game. Of course, asking to roll for dice might work, but you gotta have balls of steel the size of bowling balls to insert yourself as an NPC into a game designed for 4 players. But enough about this guy. I think we should definitely go and look over about GM Amy and the Discord mod, that's weird to say, for being the best people in the story. Amy did everything she could to enforce that she's not allowing the guy into the game just yet, but was still polite and carried everything with grace. And when the chips were down, she called in the Discord mod. And this Discord mod is amazing for just sitting down, listening to a game, not talking too much, and kicking that stranger out because somebody needed to. Now this is actually a winning combo, and GM Amy definitely looks to be one of the better GMs we could probably see in the story because she actually has a backbone of sorts. The only reason that she needed the Discord mod was just because she couldn't kick the guy out herself, which I'm sure she wanted to, and I'm sure most people would want to if they could. But I think we should definitely look away from the stranger who's being weird, and we just gotta applaud for GM Amy and the Discord mod. Unfortunately though, we do have to look at another similar story in which a Elder Scrolls game goes wrong. Story 3 is titled, Players Know More About the Lore Than I Do, by Reddit user Raxus. I recently started DMing a game that's using the Elder Scrolls as a setting. 2 of my players have a basic understanding of the lore, and 2 of my players have no understanding. But I'm answering the questions as they come up and trying to get them invested as much as I can. The setting was discussed weeks before the game actually started, and all players seemed interested in the idea. I should preface all of this by saying I do not know absolutely everything involving the lore and the world of the Elder Scrolls. I learn new things all the time, but it's something I'm very passionate about. The problem started from the moment we did Session 0. One of my players, my wife, asked, what actually is an Elder Scroll? I figured someone would ask this question and already had a response written out. But before I could utter a single word, one of the players interjects and gives their own answer that is completely inaccurate. And when I attempted to correct them, they doubled down, saying they were also right. I let it go, but it has continued to happen constantly. Last night, it reached a boiling point. I'm describing something about a snake, and one of the players who doesn't know the lore rolls a history check. I tell them they recognize this type of snake from accounts of people who have visited a faraway land, and that they are commonly kept as pets by the natives of this land. They ask out of game about Akavir, the place where the snake came from. And all I can say before I'm interrupted is, we don't know much about Akavir. Before I'm interrupted by the problem player, they go on this tangent explaining things about other places in the lore before ending on, it's basically Atlantis in the Elder Scrolls universe. At which point I tell them they're thinking of either Pyandonia or Tharas, but Akavir is something else. They continue to argue with me until the game just fizzles out for the night. I went home and actually broke down. I've been writing this campaign for a little over a year, and 2 sessions in I'm ready to just scrap the whole thing and never DM again. I know this isn't the worst thing that's ever happened, but I just need a vent, and my wife suggested I post it here. Actually, reading the title, I thought this would go a way different route than what actually happens. It's a bit surprising. I thought the players were just somebody that was super into all the Elder Scrolls games and just knew a lot of the lore and would just correct the DM on this. I'm not entirely like a historian on Elder Scrolls lore, but I like the games and I know somewhat about the setting enough to enjoy and get references and stuff. But it sounds like this player is just kind of talking out of their ass a bit. At least that's what it sounds like to me. But the main thing is that the player is arguing with the DM about the setting when the DM is trying to explain things. That's way more of a pressing issue than anything else about the actual lore accuracies of the game. You see, if the DM wants to say the sky is orange in the Elder Scrolls, the player can't say anything otherwise because the DM is the person running the game. So it really seems like the player, if anything, just has a know-it-all syndrome. Maybe just in RPGs they have this. Maybe in real life. Most likely probably real life also. But it seems like they're the person that always wants to be the smartest person in the room, whether they know what they're talking about or not. or this person just really did like a real deep dive into Elder Scrolls lore just so they know everything about it beforehand. Which, while it's not a bad thing to want to look into the setting that you're going to be playing in, especially if it's an established setting, you don't want to be that guy to where you know everything about it when your character doesn't. Because sometimes part of the fun of RPGs are learning things that both you and your character didn't know. And also sometimes just, learning things that you didn't know but your character does. But this player just took it to 11 and argued with the GM so much that it looks like they just ended that session entirely just with arguing. That's the point of no return. That's the point where if I were running the game, I would just kick the player out, or at least talk to him first, since it's only 2 sessions in. And the fact that OP's wife is there too is another thing, because it means that OP's wife can see how he reacts once he's home and gets to decompress. Because everyone knows that's a little bit different, especially if you run a game where once you get home after a good session or a bad session, you decompress in various different ways, and people can kind of tell. Most people can tell based on like how you feel, like based on how the game went. I would hope that OP would be able to talk to that player and hopefully get them to tone it down. And I'm not the type to immediately go for like the drastic nuclear answer of just kicking the player, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Now, OP should definitely talk to this player and try to curb his, know-it-allness, or if anything, OP probably should just proc for that character to roll. That's one thing that I think could work better. If you, like, for example, OP, next time, if the player is about to speak out a turn and answer something that you're already in the process of explaining, you can do one of 2 things. You can either say, hold on, let me finish explaining, or you can say, hey, how about you roll this check? And then whatever they roll, if they succeed or not, you say, no, whatever you're saying is wrong. It's this. And it's one thing you have to reinforce as a DM is saying, you're the DM. You don't want to be power hungry about it. You really don't want to come off like that. But to say respectfully, I'm the person running the game. The setting and everything is the way I am saying it is. The setting is the way I am saying it is. And you have to deal with that or you can leave. And most of the time people will just learn to deal with that. Of course, you definitely want to nip the player arguing in the bud as much as possible, and that just requires talking to him and explaining that the whole second session was basically ruined because of them. And nothing is so important to where you have to be right about trivia for Elder Scrolls to where it's worth actually arguing about. Well, OP, I hope everything works out well for you in this case, and I hope you can talk to that player and that your game gets to continue on, because a year of work is still a lot of work to put in for a game that lasts barely 2 sessions. And that's something I really hope you actually are able to use most of that work and bring it to the fruition and the campaign that you want it to be. Well, that was a good 3 stories now. I'm tired, but I think we're good to stop here. Now, please, if you guys would like to come back, or if you have your own personal horror stories to tell me, just email me at oneboardlich@gmail.com. Now, you guys have a great, wonderful day. If you guys like this, please like and subscribe. And I will see you all next time at the Lich's Tomb.